I'm super excited to welcome guys from Niantic for the very first time at WN events. We're going to have the representatives of this very famous company, and let's get it going. Hi guys, hi Laura, hi Kirsten.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for
Hey.
coming. Let's get it started.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura. Welcome to our talk, AR Game Design 101. So what's this talk going to be about? Well, here at Niantic, we spent the last several years working on AR, and we've had several billion unique AR sessions with our players, and we've learned a few lessons along the way. So this talk's going to cover some fundamental game design principles for designing an AR, the importance of prototyping an AR, and then what it means to play in the real world. But first, let us introduce ourselves. I'm Laura. I'm a senior game designer here at Niantic, and I primarily work on Pokemon Go. I was the lead game designer on features like Snapshot, Buddy Adventures, and Buddy Multiplayer. And I'd love to introduce you to one of my favorite coworkers, Kirsten.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten. I'm a senior software engineer at Niantic. I've been at Niantic a bit over 3 years, and I worked on Pokemon Go for 2.5. While on Pokemon Go, I was the tech lead for friends, gifting, trading, and the Go Snapshot feature. So before we get into the talk, I'm going to tell you a bit about Niantic. Niantic started within Google in 2011, and since then, we've launched a number of applications that use augmented reality to make the real world a more interesting place. Our mission is to encourage people to explore, exercise, and have real-world social interactions. We try to achieve this by creating fun, real-world experiences around points of interest and other mapping information, and then we support that with meaningful in-game social and visual AR experiences.
So here at Niantic, we believe that AR is more than just a technology. We think it's something that has the power to move players and transform the mundane into something amazing. But as a game designer, where do you get started tapping into that? Okay, well, let's talk about some game design tips. So first up, designing for the real world. So AR lets you create things that are impossible to recreate in just purely digital space. It allows your player to interact with the real world in unique and interesting ways. You can utilize physical location. And as you can see in this video, the experience doesn't just have to be about the player being represented by an avatar, they themselves can be a part of the experience. And as the game designer, you can create new and interesting puzzles that get the player moving and interacting with their environment. And honestly, at the end of the day, the most important part is you can convert gameplay pixels into lasting memories tied to the real world. Number two, make sure you choose the right interaction layer. So how do you start tapping into the real world? Well, games today have what we're going to refer to as traditional screen space. This would be where you would see things like the HUD, the UI, and the buttons the player is interacting with. AR comes with an additional layer we're going to call world space. World space is always going to be a lot more engaging for players, and it frees up game design to happen in any direction. It makes the experience so much more tangible. And as you can see here, the player is actually petting the Pokemon and interacting with it and playing with it versus pushing a button to make that happen. We think it's really important that you choose what part of your game makes sense in AR. If it's a mechanic that requires a lot of UI navigation, it might be better suited for a non-AR experience. Number three, visual details matter. So to create genuine AR experiences, it's not enough to simply overlay a digital asset over a live camera feed. You want to think about things like shadow, lighting, ground planes, and depth. For example, on ground planes, you want to make sure that your assets match the real floor the player's standing on so that it feels like it's connected. You want to think about things like lifelike VFX and shadows. As you can see here, the picture on the right, the Pokemon feels so much more realistic with that shadow underneath it. And then finally, you want to make sure that you consider scale. So if the player were to walk away from this Pokemon, it would get smaller as they moved away, just like a real object would. Number four, integrate the device into the experience. So we know AR technology is constantly changing and evolving, and we can't wait to see what's next. But we wanted to make sure today we talked about what it means to do AR on phones and tablets. So chances are good you're going to send your player outside to have an experience on AR, and they're going to take their phone with them. And it can be very easy for that device to feel like it's in the way of the experience. We recommend you actually build the device into the game design. So make it a tool. Economics can be something that's really easy to overlook while you're sitting at a desk. And I know what some of you are thinking, but I use my phone all day. What's the big deal? But more often than not, you're doing that in a relaxed state. You might be leaning against a table or using an armrest to help support the weight of your arm and the phone. But for AR, your player's most likely going to be holding their their phone at arm's length away from their body while they're trying to navigate. Augmented reality on phones comes with a real and serious risk of physical fatigue for your players. We recommend you keep AR sessions short because of this. We find a sweet spot to be between 30 seconds and 2 minutes. We also recommend having active resting periods where you switch back to that traditional screen space and have your player do some of the game mechanics that might be a little more maintenance heavy or menu heavy so that they can pull the phone back and have their arm take a break before going back into the AR experience. Number 6, remember AR onboarding takes time. So for those of us who have been working in AR for a little while, it may feel like old hat, but remember, for a lot of players, it's still really new technology to them. So you're going to want to walk them into the experience with something familiar. For us on Pokemon Go, we went with photos. It's something that almost everyone does on a daily basis, whether it's taking a picture of a pet, their family, or even the occasional selfie. Make sure you start your players with an experience that they're familiar with on some level, so the newest element can be the AR piece. Along with that, the first few times your players interact with AR, you want to make sure that they have really clear and easy to understand instructions. Make sure whatever input analog you go with can be easily explained with a single image and minimal text to ensure usability. AR can be a bit confusing for new players, so make sure they always have access to this instruction as well. Now I'm going to hand things over to Kirsten to talk about prototyping.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Prototyping helps us in a few big ways. It helps us find what's fun, inform design decisions, and foster collaboration. Being able to play and experience the basic mechanics of different ideas with prototypes helps us evaluate if it would be a good feature or not. Since making prototypes also forces us to take into account real-world constraints, it can expose challenges that we will have to overcome before shipping the feature. Lastly, distributing our prototypes across stakeholders has helped us collaborate effectively between our different offices and partners. Because each person is able to play the prototypes on their own, everyone is able to experience it and come up with opinions and feedback for themselves. So this video is of a hackathon project that we worked on late in 2018. Around that time, our AR platform team had a new version of their API that we wanted to use. And there were a lot of different AR ideas, and the team wasn't really sure which would be the most impactful to actually try to build. As old school Pokemon fans, Laura and I really wanted a way to take pictures of our Pokemon in the real world. So we created this prototype with some of our other teammates to share with the company. Many people ended up having a lot of fun. So we were able to put together a team to work on the Go Snapshot feature, which was our single player AR photo taking experience. This also kicked off plans for the multiplayer AR Buddy feature that the team just launched this past December. The one thing we found while prototyping was that it totally broke your sense of immersion when you're trying to take a cute close-up photo of Pikachu and then you suddenly end up inside of Pikachu's head. We wanted to figure out a way that we could keep the integrity of the Pokemon and respect their personal space without restricting a player's movement and their ability to take great photos. So we experimented with making the Pokemon flee, having them disappear with smoke clouds, and pushing them back with the phone, and so on. And after playing with all of the prototypes, we landed on a gradual blur when you get too close to the Pokemon. We found this experience to be a similar feeling to when you're trying to take a photo of something and then get too close. And the natural reaction for people was to take a step back instead of continuing forward. This is a good example of what Laura was talking about earlier, about leaning into the constraints of the device. And it was also lightweight enough to not disrupt the photo taking experience since the Pokemon's position is not altered at all. Each prototype that we worked on was created with the goal of answering a question and shared amongst the team and partners. It ultimately helped us work effectively across offices, teams, and stakeholders. We were able to make quick, informed decisions and ship Go Snapshot in less than 4 months. The prototypes also helped solidify the value of immersion details, since the team could easily try out and feel the difference they made on how real and alive the Pokemon felt. The importance of things like shadows, Pokemon reacting to the player, their size compared to other objects, and preventing clipping was really made obvious by the prototypes and allowed us to build consensus around them and prioritize them during the development process. Next slide, please. Oh, maybe, okay. Sorry, it froze for a sec.
Sorry.
So before I hand it back to Laura, I have a few quick tips that helped us during the development process. The first is to create a mock Unity environment so you can test the general flow and gameplay. Getting builds on device and then syncing and finding planes takes a lot of time. So having a mock environment really let us focus on the gameplay first and iterate quickly. We only had to create device builds when we felt that we were ready to test something we were happy with. Next is to remember that not all devices are capable of good AR experiences. We want our game to be accessible and playable by everybody, so we always make sure to think about how we can provide a similar feature and benefits to players with lower-end devices. In addition, even high-end devices have their limits, so you want to make sure that your AR experience feels good on as many devices as possible. Thanks for listening. Back to Laura.
Thanks, Kirsten. We have a few bonus tips we wanted to share today. So it's really important to remember that right now, AR is not the social norm. Players will be using your software in the real world, and AR is not VR. VR is a self-contained space. VR is amazing. It can transport the player to entirely new worlds. However, the sort of AR we're talking about today is augmenting the player's real world. So you know what else is out in the real world? Other people. And those other people may not be playing your AR experience at the same time. If others are unsure of what's happening, it can put pressure on everyone. And if your player is feeling socially stressed, they may be less likely to open your app. So you want to make sure you make AR comfortable for your player and those around them. A couple of ways to do this is keep your player moving and doing active gestures, so it's clear they're doing some sort of activity on their phone. And also, if they do need to pause to take a photo, have them focus the assets towards the sky or the ground and away from faces in general. Encourage situational awareness. So multitasking can be really hard. It's hard to navigate the world as it is, never mind with the additional AR layer. While that AR layer can enhance the experience of the real world, you want to make sure it's in a way that encourages safe and thoughtful behavior. Remember, the world's not flat. There are gradients everywhere. Design experiences that encourages players to pay attention to their surroundings. A couple of ways to do this is give the player the time and the space to feel comfortable while they are staying aware of their surroundings. Make sure your player feels like they can momentarily look up and away from their device and that the game will be waiting for them when they look back. And finally, avoid encouraging risky behavior by not including time mechanics in your AR sessions. That puts extra pressure on the player that you don't want to cause. So today we've covered designing for the real world, making sure you pick the right interaction layer, why it's so important to think about the visual details, the importance of integrating the device into the experience so it feels like it's meant to be there, to not overlook ergonomics. Don't forget to really think through your AR onboarding. Keep in mind that AR is not the social norm quite yet. And always be sure to make sure you're encouraging situational awareness for your players. And also how important prototyping is when it comes to AR. In summary, AR is this incredibly powerful tool that allows game designers to create wholly unique experiences. If you apply some of the tips we've covered today and take the time to prototype those great ideas out, and keep in mind the challenges of gaming in the real world, we think you can change your player's view of the world. If you'd like to see us putting some of these AR game design fundamentals into practice, you can check out features like Go Snapshot, Buddy Adventures, and Buddy Multiplayer in Pokemon Go today. We hope we've imparted a few of our lessons we've learned through our own efforts, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for all of us. Thank you so much for watching our talk today. We also want to give a quick shout out to our amazing coworkers who helped us make this presentation. Just like any part of game development, it really was a team effort. And if you'd like to learn more about Niantic, please visit us at our website. Keep creating amazing AR game experiences, and we'll meet you out there.
Thank you, Lauren, Kirsten. I believe we have time for a short Q&A session, right?
Sure.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat, and while guys here are asking more and more, I also have one for myself. So you've given a great summary on how to be successful on creating an AR game, right? But how would you evaluate the role of the setting and the franchise and the IP? Because in my opinion, one of I would say one of the very important traits of Pokemon Go success is like the universe of Pokemon, which is extremely popular. Is it possible to achieve success with your AR game without having such the strong franchise or an IP on your back?
Sure. So we've been very fortunate to be able to work on the Pokemon franchise and work with the Pokemon Company. It's a wonderful franchise that is beloved pretty much universally globally. But I do think there's a lot of space still for really great AR experiences for different ideas and thoughts. The biggest thing I would say when you're deciding what sort of franchise or new world you want to create is make sure it makes sense in AR, right? Like it works really well to have Pokemon appear in AR because they feel like they should be there. They feel like they make sense being in the AR experience. So whatever you're choosing, pick something that feels like it's going to make sense in AR so that you're already a step ahead of the experience.
Thank you very much. And the next question is coming from Rinalei in the chat, and she asks a very interesting question. How do you navigate your player to avoid dangerous areas in real life, like crossing roads, like some obstacles and stuff?
Yeah, so for us, it's really important that we're thinking about where the player is playing and how they're playing. So for us, we have Pokestops in the game, and those Pokestops are at places that are deemed safe to play, right? They're known areas, they're safe locations, and we focus a lot of gameplay around those known areas. The biggest thing I think any app could do, though, is what we talked about with situational awareness, is making sure that you're warning the player to be paying attention, warning the player to take in, look up and take in the area around them. Like you want to make sure as much as possible you're encouraging your player to stay aware of their surroundings. So even if they get super excited about the game's still encouraging them to pay attention to where they're walking and what they're looking at.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, how do you start writing a game design document for an AR game? I believe the question here is how the game design document for an AR game is different from, like, I would say, a typical match 3 game or a shooter game or something.
Sure. Yeah, it's surprisingly similar. My process has always been I like to write what I call a one-pager, which is just a high-level summary of what the feature is and what I think the feature could do for the players. And then at Niantic, we share that with a group that involves product managers, producers, engineers, artists, technical artists, just the various cross-functional team. And we get together and we talk about that idea together, and we figure out if it's something as a group we want to pursue. And then if it is, we would start writing out the bigger game design document or the feature spec. And that would be a very similar process for doing something that wasn't a part of AR, but one of the bigger differences is you're really focusing on that AR experience as you're writing out the design and thinking about things like, where should the player be having this experience? How long should the experience be for? So there's some details you're focusing on more, but really the general basics of writing game design documents applies pretty universally.
Thank you very much. And another question is, can you define what are the biggest limitations of the AR technology, like what you can or potentially cannot create. Did you face any such struggle?
Kirsten, do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges of the different phone devices?
Yeah, so I guess that doesn't really limit like what we can create, but one of the biggest bigger issues that were difficult to like resolve is that like different devices have like different chipsets and that stuff. So we were having like an issue where some specific iOS devices with a specific chipset was like always crashing when people were trying to take photos. And it took us a really long time to like track down the issue. But then also like when we finally tracked it down, it was like hard for us to reproduce internally because we didn't have the right device. And eventually like it ended up being fixed by like a Unity upgrade, which is like, we were just like, okay, well, that's great. But it wasn't really anything like concrete. But yeah, in terms of challenges, like our AR platform teams always trying to like push the limit of like what you can actually do in AR. So multiplayer experiences, like when we first shipped Go Snapshot, we had like a pretty good demo of it internally, but it wasn't really ready for everyone in the world to use it. And so the platform team worked really hard to like improve that technology and then make it so that like last December we could actually ship it to real players and it would work reliably.
Yeah, and then like we touched on in the talk a little bit too during the prototyping section, not all phones are capable of really strong AR experiences. So for us, we chose to have backup options for all those gameplay experiences. It's really important to us that no player is ever blocked on being able to progress in the game. So if a phone is unable technologically to be able to do the AR experience, we make sure there is at least a way for them to move forward if there's a quest or something like that requesting that they use the feature. So it's really important that if you're trying to reach a lot of folks that you have a backup option in place.
Thanks a lot. That's great to know that like mostly sky is the limit, and like the only restricting thing is like the technology and the capability of our mobile phones. So I would say we have the last question for now, and it's like totally up to you. So from your own perspective, how soon we would commonly use augmented reality technologies and AR games will become as common as like simple idle games or match 3 games?
Yeah, I think we're heading in that direction for sure. I know at Niantic we're certainly excited about what the future is going to hold.
Sorry, Laura, I believe we lost you for just a few seconds. Kirsten, could you comment on that while we're waiting for Laura to just reconnect from the blink? How do you feel it, when we will just move to completely all AR games?
All AR games? So I think like, I don't think like we'll move, like all gaming will become AR games because there are like a lot of different experiences that you can have like on your like on your console or on your mobile phone, like that is not necessarily augmented reality. I think like we will see more like AR games in the future as like people come up with like more like I guess like more like really like meaningful or like fun ideas that you can only experience in AR versus like in VR or like non-AR space. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
I think it's like really up to like the people creating games to like create that really fun experience so that like more and more people will see like the value and the fun in augmented reality. And sorry, Laura, you can go ahead. We lost your audio for like
Sorry about that.
30 seconds.
Sorry. I was just saying, very much in line with what you were saying that, you know, I think as more developers are creating AR experiences, we're quickly heading to the world where there's going to be a lot of really awesome options in AR, and that AR has the potential to make new and interesting games and also just make life in general interesting and provide unique ways to interact with the world. So I think we're going to get there fairly soon, and that there's going to be a lot of really awesome ways to use the technology.
Thank you very much, guys. It was such a great talk, and thanks for answering the questions. We also have sent you the link to the Q&A section of the chats on WN Hub. So please log in and spend like 5 or 10 minutes with the audience just answering the question. Is going to be so great. Thanks a lot for coming.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.